Arizona Territory, 1875, where law is still in its infancy and the law of hunger overrides all other rules. That day, Clara Harrison knew two things for certain. One was that her 6-week-old daughter hadn't eaten properly for 3 days. The other was that tonight, someone would have to pay for that to change. No one could have foreseen how a single desperate decision would transform the fate of a border town, and how a man known to everyone as a heartless scoundrel would discover something within himself he never thought existed. The Black Eagle Saloon's door nearly came off its hinges when Ethan Wade entered. The man who owned Blackwater's mines and the only mill in the area was famous for being able to buy anything and anyone. When he saw the new girl standing in the corner, he decided that evening she would be his next acquisition. Clara stood trembling against the back wall of the saloon. Never in her life had she thought she would end up here. Not so long ago, she was the daughter of a respectable Baltimore family, giving piano lessons and dreaming of opening a school someday. Then she met Thomas, the young doctor with dreamy eyes, who brought her the promise of the West. Marriage, happiness, a hopeful journey toward a better life. Now she knew how quickly dreams could turn into nightmares. Thomas couldn't resist the temptation of the card tables, and before Clara noticed, he had lost everything they had. Then came the fever that took Thomas, and Clara was left alone in a strange town with a baby in her arms, without $1 to her name. She hadn't paid rent in 3 weeks, and the landlord had warned her several times. This morning Sarah's crying had grown weak, which frightened Clara more than anything else in her life. Wade sat at the bar. He was drinking his 5th whiskey and watching Clara without pause. He knew everything about her. He knew she was the doctor's widow, that she was raising a little girl, and that she was desperate. Wade had always liked desperate women because they never haggled over the price. Eddie, the salon owner, leaned over to Wade. "It's her first night. She's never done this before, but she owes me rent, and this was the only way she could work it off." Wade nodded and gestured with his eyes for Clara to come over. Clara walked slowly across the salon while the men's gazes practically burned her skin. She hated herself for what she was doing. But Sarah's face floated before her, how she had tried weakly to cry that morning. The small town watched disapprovingly as Clara went up to Wade's house. The lights of the massive estate on the hillside shone far. Everyone knew Wade was the town's true master. The sheriff was in his pocket. The mayor danced like a puppet when Wade pulled the strings. No one dared to challenge him. No one dared to stand against him. And now Clara became his, like everything else in this town. When Wade entered the bedroom, Clara was already standing by the window. She didn't turn when she heard his footsteps. Wade didn't speak, just threw a bag of money on the bed. "I can see in your face you don't belong here. Why are you here?" Clara turned around. Her eyes were red from holding back tears, but her gaze met Wade's eyes directly. "My daughter. 6 weeks old. She's barely eaten for 3 days. I have no milk because I haven't eaten properly for days. No money for milk? No money for bread. Tomorrow they'll throw me out of my room and then we'll die on the street." Wade froze. Something strange, long buried, stirred inside him. A memory flashed before him. His mother's face as she begged the landlord not to evict them. It happened after his father's death, after the mine accident, when no one cared about them. "Get dressed." "That's not what I'm paying for." Wade turned on his heel and left the room. Clara stood there confused, then slowly got dressed. When she stepped out of the room, Wade was waiting. "Where is your child now?" "At my neighbor's." "Martha is watching her while I'm here." Wade nodded and started down the stairs. Clara followed, not knowing what to expect. Wade stopped his car in front of Martha's house and knocked. The elderly woman opened the door suspiciously but relaxed when she saw Clara. "Martha, how is the child?" Martha looked at Wade, then at Clara, and finally answered. "Not good, Mr. Wade. She's barely cried all day, which isn't a good sign for a baby." Wade entered the modest room where Sarah lay in a worn cradle. He leaned over and looked at the child for a long time. Then he turned on his heel. "Stay here. I'll be right back." That night, Wade returned not only to Clara, but with milk, flour, and all other necessities. He also brought in a doctor who practiced in the neighboring town and whom he had dragged out of bed in the middle of the night. The doctor examined Sarah, gave her medicine, and provided Clara with advice. While Clara fed the little girl, Wade watched them from the corner. And something strange, unfamiliar began to stir in him. Perhaps a memory from a time when he still believed in people, when he could still trust and love. Wade's life wasn't easy. As a child, his father worked in the mines under Blackwater's previous owner, old Henderson. When he died in an accident, Henderson didn't pay compensation, and his family ended up on the street. Wade's mother soon followed her husband to the grave, and Wade swore he would never be poor again. And he kept his promise, though it cost him dearly. He sold his soul for wealth. One morning, Clara was surprised to find Wade at her door. The man walked in without a word, checked on Sarah, then put an envelope on the table. "Your landlord has already received the money. This contains enough for 6 more months, and work at the school. They need a teacher. I told them you can play piano and read." Clara wanted to protest, but Wade raised his hand. "This isn't charity. I don't like charity. This is an investment. When your daughter grows up, she'll be smart and educated, and this town needs smart people." In the following weeks, Wade regularly visited Clara and Sarah, but never in the way the town gossiped about. He brought food, warm blankets for cold nights, and meanwhile, he told stories. He talked about his life, the mines, the tough decisions. Clara listened and slowly began to understand what had shaped this man into who he became. Meanwhile, rumors spread through town. Some said Wade had gone mad. Others claimed Clara had used some magic, like witches in old tales. And some said that perhaps there was still room for kindness in Wade's heart. Perhaps little Sarah's smile brought a light to his life that money never could. However, there was one person who didn't look kindly upon this turn of events. James Blackwood, the town's banker, who had been Wade's rival for years, and who himself had set his sights on Clara when she first arrived in town with her husband. Blackwood knew that if Wade changed, his influence would diminish. He had to do something. One afternoon, while Clara was teaching at school, Blackwood showed up. Despite his elegant attire and smooth manners, Clara immediately sensed danger. "Mrs. Harrison, I'm worried about you. You see, Wade isn't the man he pretends to be. Many have died under mysterious circumstances who crossed his path." Clara dismissed Blackwood's concerns, but his words planted a small seed of doubt in her mind. Did she really know Wade as well as she thought? That evening, when Wade visited, Clara watched his face as he played with Sarah. He looked hard, but there was something else in his eyes when he looked at the little girl. "Why are you helping us?" Wade didn't answer for a long time. Then he slowly spoke. "I was 11 when my mother died. Her last words were, 'Ethan, don't forget who you were before the world told you who to become.' I think I forgot this until I saw you and your daughter." Clara's heart tightened. She stepped closer to Wade, and for the first time in weeks, she took his hand. Wade stiffened, then slowly relaxed. That evening, they talked for a long time, and Clara began to understand that beneath the cold exterior lived a wounded but not lost person. One evening, after Wade left, Clara found a box on the table. Inside was a key and a letter. In the letter, Wade offered her his small house on the edge of town where Clara and Sarah could live safely. Clara didn't know what to think. She had feelings for Wade, but was also afraid of them. She was afraid to trust a man again, afraid to be disappointed again. The next morning, Blackwood's men arrived at Clara's house without notice. They claimed that Wade had accumulated gambling debts and the house where Clara lived now belonged to Blackwood. Clara and Sarah had to leave immediately. Clara desperately tried to find an explanation. She went to look for Wade at the mine but couldn't find him. At his office, they said Wade had traveled east on business. Clara didn't understand what was happening. Wade was with her last night. They talked and laughed. How could he have left without saying anything? When she returned to her house, she found a padlock on the door. Martha took them in, but she knew this could only be temporary. Clara felt like she was back where she started. And worst of all, she felt Wade had betrayed her, just like everyone else in her life. That evening, however, an unknown rider arrived in town. No one recognized him immediately because his face was partially covered. He went straight to Blackwood's office, locked the door, and didn't come out for a long time. The tension in town was almost palpable. The next morning, to the town's astonishment, Blackwood announced he was selling the bank and leaving town. At the same time, Clara got her house back, and unexpectedly, it turned out the house was in her name, free of any debt. That evening, while Clara was rocking Sarah in her reclaimed home, a doorbell disturbed her. Wade stood at the door, dusty from the road. "You didn't leave." Wade entered, sat down next to Sarah's bed, gently touching the little girl's face, who was already asleep. "No, I just had to sort out a few things. Blackwood had been keeping false accounts for years. And he was the one who convinced your husband to gamble. Thomas was never a gambler until Blackwood showed up." Clara looked at him stunned. "How do you know this?" Wade looked up at her, his eyes serious. "Because I investigated your husband's death. I don't believe it was natural. And I don't believe it was a coincidence that Blackwood appeared when you were in your most difficult situation." Clara sat down, her legs trembling. Wade continued. "I didn't help because I bought you. I helped because you showed me that there could still be something good in me. And that can't be paid for with money." As the day's last rays filtered through the window, Clara took Wade's hand. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but tonight she wasn't alone, and she knew she never would be again. The town slowly accepted that Ethan Wade, the tough businessman, had changed. He didn't become a saint. He still dealt hard in business, but money wasn't his only interest anymore. The miners got better conditions, the school got a new building, and Wade's house, which was once a symbol of loneliness and bitterness, now filled with laughter and life. 6 months later, on a sunny Sunday afternoon, Wade and Clara married in the town's small church. Little Sarah, who could hardly wait to start walking, happily babbled during the ceremony. The whole town was there to witness what many considered a miracle. Clara often thought about that night at the Black Eagle Saloon. That night when she felt she had lost everything, but in reality, that's when she found everything she had ever wanted. Life leads us on strange paths, she thought, looking at Wade, who took Sarah in his lap. And sometimes in the greatest darkness we find the brightest light.